The life safety elements of an inspection are both on the inside and the outside of the building. They are designed for not only occupant safety, but building safety as well. During the life safety portion of the inspection, you'll be looking at items such as entrances, fire extinguishers, fire alarms, sprinklers, fire hydrants, egress, ingress, etc. So it's very important to develop a plan. We're going to begin today's inspection right here on the outside of the building. One of the first things you're going to look at when you're thinking of life safety section under the CommSop is fire access road, and is there enough access for an apparatus of emergency vehicle to come in. A fire access road is how the fire department or emergency services is going to make its way into the property. And that's very important. You can't have parking lots so narrow that we can't get something in. So we're looking for obstructions of the fire access road. And then secondly, is there enough height access? That'd be 13 foot 6 inches. That could be to a wire, that could be to an overhang, that could be to an awning. But we want to make sure that there's enough height that that emergency vehicle can pull into the property. We also need to make sure that we have access at least 3 foot around any fire hydrant. That's very important. We might not have the fire hydrant on the property. Fire hydrants are typically designed by the municipality or the local jurisdiction, and they were installed during construction, usually every 500 or 1,000 lineal feet, but we need to make sure we have that. And I usually take a picture. In this case, I'll have a fire hydrant that might be 300 or 400 foot away. I just take a picture of it, make sure it's open 3 foot around all sides. And then lastly, we need to make sure that the building sign is visible from the street. And so if we have a sign in front of the building that you can't see, maybe it's because the foliage is too much or it's not of contrast. And so when we look at our standard, it's to make sure there is some form of signage visible from the street of a different contrast. Beyond that, there's other safety things you're going to consider, but in following the CommSop, those are the 3 most important things on the outside of the building. As part of the CommSop, we are to note the presence of a fire sprinkler system. One of your challenges is you don't know if there's a fire sprinkler system in the building. In this case, I have fire sprinkler control valve written right here on this door. Behind this door will be our sprinkler system. We might also know there's a sprinkler system by noting that there is a hookup for the fire department into the fire sprinkler system called a fire department connector. And then also on the outside of a building, in most commercial buildings, we'll have a box called the knock box. And what that knock box is that's a box where there's a key for the emergency services to access the building. Now, the inspection of the lock box, inspection of the control valve, inspection of the fire department's access, all those are beyond our scope. But what we need to look at is the presence of a fire sprinkler system. Let's go take a look at that. Most sprinkler systems are located inside of the building. You will find some, and this is called a fire sprinkler riser. You will find some of these riser valves and assemblies on the outside, especially in southern climates that they don't freeze. We're up here in the north, up in the mountains, and so this is located in its own room. And when we're really on the CommSop looking for the presence of a sprinkler system, and then secondly, has it ever been painted other than the manufacturer? Now, this painting largely is for the heads and the apparatus that actually puts the fire out. And anything we're doing here on the riser is beyond the CommSop, but I think for your clients, it's going to be important to first look at the system and identify whether or not it's leaking. You'd know that by a puddle on the floor. And then secondly, I always try to take a look at the label plate. And on the tag should have an inspection date on it. These are typically inspected annually. And so I just want to take a picture of this whole assembly, look for leaks, and take a picture of the label plate. That's the scope of what a typical CommSop life safety inspection of the sprinkler system should include. Fire alarms are an essential part of the life safety inspection. While not every building has a fire alarm, our CommSop says we are first to note the presence of a fire alarm system. The accessibility requirements to an alarm panel is the same as any other electric panel. We should have 36 inches deep as well as 30 inches side to side. So make sure that all panels are accessible. If you want to go beyond the scope a little bit, I think an easy thing to look for on any fire alarm system is to look at the lights. There should be a light on indicating that it's functional. And if there's any other system of lighting on there, maybe there's a light on this that might say trouble, or there might say something else about it, then that's something I want to take note of. And then also it should be making any noise. I'll go to a lot of these systems and the battery might be bad and it might be chirping or making some audible tone. That would be something to take note of as well. But following the ComSop, note the presence and make sure it's accessible. Within the life safety portion of the inspection, you're going to be called upon to look at exit doors. When looking at exit doors, first and foremost, every exit door in the property should open up outward or in the path of your exit. It must be at least 32 inches wide and open up 90 degrees or more as you're leaving the building. We must verify that if it is able to be locked from the egress side, which is our interior side moving outward, then there must be a sign that says must remain unlocked during business hours. And if there is any type of lock present, like a chain or a padlock on the egress side, then that should be noted in the inspection because those doors must be able to be openable in the event of an emergency. Then lastly, when we're looking at exit doors, they should have proper signage. That signage should indicate that this is an exit door. It should be illuminated. And in fact, that illumination should last at least 90 minutes in the event of a power outage, which is something you could test if you'd like to by hitting the test button to make sure the battery operates. Then beyond that, you should look at any other directional signage or lighting that's present, as well as verifying there are at least two means of exit. Now, one caveat to two means of exit: if the building is less than 75 foot in depth, we only require one exit door. But any building or any property that is less than 75 foot in depth only requires one exit door. When inspecting the interior and looking at the exits, we need to put ourselves in the mindset or the body of somebody trying to leave in the event of an emergency. We came in at the front door, which is clearly delineated as an exit. We have a nice sign above that door. And then remember, if the building is less than 75 foot deep, we only need one exit out of the building. But if the building is greater than 75 foot, we need to have a secondary exit. That secondary exit, or there could be 3 or 4 or 5 more exits, is just in case the primary is blocked, we have a secondary means of exit. So if I'm in this room and it's greater than 75 foot, then I would have a secondary exit, which I have here on the opposite wall as the primary. And then that allows us a safe way out. Now, one thing to consider when you're doing these inspections, we need to also make sure that in that exit path or in opening the door to the exit spot on the outside of the building, we don't have any trip hazards. That trip hazard could be a bad landing spot on the outside of the building. That could be storage put in the path. Any of that, kind of put yourself in that mindset of, I need to find out to make sure I don't have any trip hazards. Now, we also want to make sure that in this path or in this place that we have in our exit, we do have emergency lighting. That is part of the ComSop. In this case, on our exit signs, we have an emergency light attached to it. And that's a light that will illuminate when the power is out. And that should last at least 90 minutes of illumination. And so you could, on your inspection, hit the test button. You're not required to, but that again will note whether or not that functions or doesn't function. Then one other thing that I've always recommended is I look to make sure that these lights are modern. I don't know if I have a definition for modern or not modern, but I promise you, when you see one that's not modern, you know that, because a lot of times these batteries are not accessible. In these cases, on these lights that we have here, they're a nice modern light, which is a battery that we can maintain. So with that, let's look at some other safety items in the building. Another part of the CommSop includes inspecting for the presence of a fire separation door. And in doing that, making sure it has a closure and a latch and is also not propped, blocked, or wedged of any type. A fire separation door is often a door installed in a long hallway or corridor, or separating one part of the building from another part of the building. In this case, these are our fire separation doors, separating that hallway from this space. Again, these doors need to be remained closed at all times, never propped, wedged, or blocked, and must be able to open in the path of egress. But if you want to go beyond that, there should be a label either on the door slab or the door jamb. That label should never be painted. It should be visible at all times. In this case, we have a label that has been painted over and it is not readable. And so it's very important that you take a picture of that. Note that for your clients. One other thing you should look at is glass. In this case, this is an older door. This glass is a tempered glass. You're not required to identify tempered glass. In a modern fire separation door, this would actually be wired glass. So I would look for wired glass, hinges, latches, closures, and lastly, labels. Some commercial properties give you the opportunity to inspect shower doors. As part of our CommSop, there are two main elements of shower doors that must be present. First, all shower doors must open outward. Any inward opening door could involve an entrapment, especially in a clogged drain. And so we would verify that the door does open outward. And secondly, they should have an etching or a label in the corner of it indicating it is tempered glass. The inspection of this particular door, it is a frosted glass, but what I don't have is I don't have the tempered etching. I'm simply going to make a remark on my report saying tempered etching is not visible, and I'm going to leave it at that, but I am going to verify that it is all opening outward. Check on the tempered glass etching as well as opening outward on your next inspection as well. Fire extinguishers are a key element to the safety and life safety portion of a building. When looking at fire extinguishers, one of the first things you should always try to identify is the fact they're not blocked. A blocked fire extinguisher does not allow anybody to get to it. Now, within the CommSop, one of the things we're supposed to look at when looking at fire extinguishers is to make sure they're properly placed around the building. They should be placed in an easy spot to get to, in part of the egress or movement plan of the building. This type of fire extinguisher that we have is just a normal fire extinguisher in a building. It's what's called an ABC fire extinguisher, which puts out various types of fires, and they need to be placed within 75 walking steps from the next one. So if I'm standing in one spot, 75 foot that way and 75 foot that way, better be a fire extinguisher. And again, not blocked. If we're in a commercial cooking space, any spot that cooks in a commercial environment, then those fire extinguishers need to be a type K fire extinguisher for kitchen and be within 30 foot of every cooking appliance. And so when you're doing your inspection, verify that we have a fire extinguisher, verify that they're within 75 walking paces of any one spot. And then lastly, beyond the CommSop, but something that's very important to look at, is look for the label plate. That label on that should have an inspection date within 12 months of its last inspection. That just verifies that somebody's watching the unit as well as paying attention to make sure it's charged. A very normal thing to find, especially in a commercial structure, is not having all the fire extinguishers properly labeled or in compliance and dates. And then again, watch to make sure that they're not obstructed. We've discussed sprinkler systems only in the fact that we talked about the riser and some of the elements that you'd see in the main part of the sprinkler system. But as far as the CommSop goes, we're supposed to look at the sprinkler systems visually from the inside. A couple of key aspects when looking at the sprinkler is first, making sure none of the heads are obstructed. Next, making sure they're not otherwise painted from the factory. So in other words, if somebody's come into the building and spray painted the sprinkler head, that would be something that we're looking for, because we can't have that clogs the orifices. And then lastly, making sure we have at least 18 inches of clearance to stored items or anything else that might obstruct the sprinkler system. So as part of the CommSop, you need to look at the heads on the inside of the building, make sure they're not obstructed, make sure they have clearance, and make sure they're not painted. It's important to do that on every inspection, especially when sprinkler systems are installed. General storage in a commercial property is part of the CommSop. Making sure that it is neat and tidy and orderly is very important. If it's flammable items, then those should be isolated around an area that we can contain if there's a fire. If there's flammable items, then we got to make sure there's a no smoking sign. That is something that you as an inspector doing a visual inspection should be able to identify. If it's general storage, it shouldn't be within 18 inches of a sprinkler system and within 3 foot of a heat emitting device like a furnace or some other, or tube heater or some other heat generating source. And then when we come into general storage rooms, like this electric room that we're in today, we can't have anything stored in this room that's not part of that electric system. So gun safes, golf clubs, light bulbs, boxes, none of that should be in this room. I should be able to have access to all of these pieces of electric without being encumbered by anything like stored items. And so it's very important as you're walking through the building, you keep that in mind. Nothing in electric rooms that's not part of this electric system, nothing in mechanic rooms that's not part of that mechanical room. And then lastly, as you go through your inspection, you're going to keep your eye open at partition walls. In this particular electric room, I have a large partition wall that separates this room from the rest of the building. And what I'm particularly looking for are penetrations. Penetrations like conduit or pipe penetrations or ductwork are all areas that if they penetrate these walls and don't have a proper seal, can transfer that heat or transfer that fire to another part of the building. And that's something we want to keep a mindful eye on as well. So think about storage and fire safety as you're doing your inspections. The life safety portion of the inspection is so all-encompassing. And we've just talked about some of the touch points in this video. And that includes the storage of just goods through the building. We need to make sure they're never blocking exits, they're never blocking doors, they're not blocking life safety equipment like sprinklers and fire extinguishers. Then beyond that, there's so many other things that we haven't touched on in this video. Those would include exit stairways and corridors. I promise we'll do those in a future video. But when you're going through your inspection, think about all those things that you can impart to your clients and making sure that they can keep their building as safe as possible. So look at the CommSop, understand what you should be inspecting and what's not required to be inspected, and be able to help your clients as best as you can.